Hey, step away from that door right now. What do you think you're doing?
I'm unlocking my office. I work here. Is there a problem, officer?
Your office? This is a government building. I need ID and proof you're authorized to be here.
I have identification, but I don't need to prove I'm authorized. This is being recorded.
At exactly 6:47 a.m. on a Monday morning in Greenville County, South Carolina, Sheriff's Deputy Marcus Webb thought he was doing his job. He'd received a call about a suspicious person trying to access the county administration building before normal business hours, and when he arrived, he saw exactly what he expected to see. A black woman in casual clothes standing at a side entrance, key in hand, looking like she didn't belong. What Deputy Webb didn't know, what he was about to discover in the most humiliating way possible, was that the woman he was about to arrest wasn't a criminal. She was Keisha Williams, the elected district attorney of Greenville County, the person who supervised the prosecution of every criminal case in the county, the person who decided whether deputies like Webb got charged when they broke the law, the person who had sent 14 police officers to prison in the last 4 years for corruption and civil rights violations. And in the next 32 minutes, Deputy Marcus Webb was about to make the biggest mistake of his life, trigger an investigation that would expose a culture of racial bias in the sheriff's department, and discover that the woman he just handcuffed had the power to end not just his career, but his freedom. Before we go any further, I need you to do something right now. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, your city, your state, your country. Because what happened to Keisha Williams in front of her own office could happen anywhere. And the only reason we're talking about it is because she had the power to fight back. Most people don't. And if you believe accountability matters, if you think people in power need to be held responsible when they abuse that power, hit that subscribe button right now. This story is about to get intense in ways you won't expect, and you don't want to miss what happens when someone arrests the one person who can actually destroy them. Keisha Williams was not your average 43-year-old black woman in South Carolina. While most people her age were navigating middle management positions and planning for retirement in 20 years, Keisha was running the largest prosecutor's office in the state outside of Charleston. She was the district attorney for Greenville County, elected by a landslide margin 2 years earlier, overseeing a staff of 37 prosecutors, 23 investigators, and 41 support staff. She had a budget of $8.4 million. She prosecuted approximately 12,000 cases per year, and she had a conviction rate of 87%, one of the highest in South Carolina. Getting to that position hadn't been luck or political connections. It had been 30 years of relentless work. Keisha had grown up in the poorest neighborhood in Greenville, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs, day shift at a textile mill and night shift cleaning office buildings. Money had always been tight. There had been weeks when dinner was rice and beans, 4 nights in a row, because that's all they could afford. Keisha had worn her cousin's hand-me-down clothes to school and pretended not to notice when other kids made fun of her shoes that were 2 years out of style and had holes in the soles. But Keisha's mother had drilled one thing into her daughter's head from the time she could understand words: education is the only way out. So Keisha had studied. She'd gotten straight A's through elementary school, middle school, and high school. She'd worked part-time jobs, starting at 14, fast food, retail, babysitting, anything that paid. She'd saved every dollar for college. She'd earned a full academic scholarship to the University of South Carolina, where she'd majored in criminal justice and graduated summa cum laude with a 3.97 GPA. She'd gotten into the University of South Carolina School of Law, where she'd worked as a research assistant to pay for expenses the loans didn't cover. She'd made law review. She'd graduated in the top 10% of her class. After law school, Keisha had joined the Greenville County District Attorney's Office as an assistant district attorney. Starting salary, $42,000 a year? She could have made 3 times that at a private firm, but Keisha hadn't gone to law school to get rich. She'd gone to law school to put criminals in prison. She'd started in the misdemeanor division, prosecuting shoplifting cases and DUIs and simple assaults. She'd won 92% of her cases in the first year. She'd been promoted to the felony division after 18 months, faster than anyone in the office's history. She'd prosecuted armed robberies, sexual assaults, drug trafficking cases. She'd put gang members away for 20-year sentences. She'd convicted a serial rapist who terrorized Greenville for 3 years. She'd sent a corrupt city councilman to federal prison for taking bribes. Keisha had developed a reputation. Defense attorneys hated going up against her. She was meticulous. She prepared. Cases like she was going to war. She knew every detail of every file. She could recite witness statements from memory. She anticipated every defense strategy and had counter moves ready. In depositions, she asked questions that trapped defendants into admissions they didn't realize they were making. In court, she presented evidence with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of a preacher. Juries loved her. In 14 years as a prosecutor, she'd won 247 felony convictions. She'd lost 19 cases. That was a win rate of 92.8%. But Keisha wasn't just good at convicting criminals. She was fearless about going after corrupt cops. In her 14 years as a prosecutor, she'd personally handled 11 cases involving police officers accused of crimes. She'd convicted a deputy for stealing drugs from evidence. She'd sent a police sergeant to prison for 8 years for sexually assaulting women during traffic stops. She'd prosecuted a detective for planting evidence and gotten him 15 years. She'd charged a SWAT team member with manslaughter after he killed an unarmed man during a raid and lied about it. She'd taken on 3 deputies who'd beaten a handcuffed suspect in a holding cell and put all 3 in prison. The police union hated her. They'd endorsed her opponent in the district attorney race 2 years ago. They'd donated $47,000 to his campaign. They'd run ads saying Keisha was anti-police and soft on crime. The voters hadn't believed it. Keisha had won with 64% of the vote, carrying every precinct in the county, including the white suburban areas where people usually voted for tough-on-crime prosecutors. She'd won because people trusted her. They knew she'd prosecute criminals regardless of whether they wore a badge or not. Since becoming district attorney, Keisha had continued that pattern. She'd charged 7 law enforcement officers in 2 years. 3 had pleaded guilty. 4 were awaiting trial. She'd fired 2 of her own prosecutors for withholding exculpatory evidence, evidence that would have helped defendants. She'd created a conviction integrity unit that reviewed old cases for possible wrongful convictions. That unit had already overturned 3 convictions and freed 3 people who'd served a combined 38 years for crimes they didn't commit. Keisha had also made enemies. The sheriff of Greenville County, Robert Buck Morrison, was a 62-year-old white man who'd been sheriff for 16 years. He'd come up through the department in an era when tough policing meant breaking heads and asking questions later. He'd been named in 4 excessive force lawsuits in his career as a deputy, all settled quietly by the county. He ran the sheriff's department like a personal fiefdom. Deputies who questioned him got transferred to undesirable assignments. Deputies who were loyal got promoted regardless of competence. And deputies who treated black residents differently than white residents were never disciplined because Buck saw that as just reality-based policing. Buck Morrison and Keisha Williams had clashed repeatedly. When she'd charged one of his deputies with assault, Buck had called her personally and told her she was making a mistake and turning your back on the people who keep this county safe. Keisha had told him that her job was to prosecute crimes, not to protect criminals who happened to wear badges. Buck had hung up on her. Since then, their relationship had been openly hostile. Buck had stopped returning her calls. His deputies had stopped cooperating with her investigators on cases. Buck had gone on local radio and said the DA's office was more interested in attacking law enforcement than protecting citizens. Keisha hadn't cared. She'd kept doing her job. That Monday morning, Keisha had arrived at the county administration building at 6:45 a.m., earlier than her usual 7:30 arrival time. She'd been working on a major case, a public corruption prosecution, involving a county commissioner accused of taking kickbacks from contractors. The trial was starting in 3 days, and Keisha wanted to review her opening statement one more time before her staff arrived. She liked working early in the morning when the office was quiet and she could think without interruptions. Keisha had parked in her assigned spot in the parking lot behind the building, marked Reserved District Attorney. She'd gotten out of her Honda Accord wearing jeans, a Clemson University sweatshirt, and sneakers. It was her preparation outfit, comfortable clothes she wore when she was going to spend hours reading files and practicing arguments. She'd grabbed her work bag from the back seat. The bag contained her laptop, 3 file folders for the corruption case, her opening statement outline, and her notes from witness prep sessions. She'd walked to the side entrance of the building, the one closest to her office on the second floor. The county administration building was a 3-story brick structure built in 1987, housing multiple county offices, including the district attorney, the county clerk, the planning department, and several others. The main entrance didn't open until 8:30 a.m., but county employees with keys could use the side entrances starting at 6 a.m. Keisha had a key to the southeast side entrance. She'd used it hundreds of times. She'd pulled her key from her purse and was inserting it into the lock when she heard the voice behind her. "Hey, step away from that door right now. What do you think you're doing?" Keisha had turned around, confused. A sheriff's deputy was walking toward her from a patrol car parked at the curb. White male, probably late 30s, hand resting on his duty belt near his weapon. His name tag read, Webb. Deputy Marcus Webb was 38 years old, 11 years with the Greenville County Sheriff's Office, currently assigned to the Patrol Division covering downtown Greenville. His service record showed 17 commendations for arrests and 2 letters of reprimand for use of force violations. He'd been involved in 9 use of force incidents in 11 years, 8 involving black suspects, 1 involving a Hispanic suspect, 0 involving white suspects. He'd received 5 complaints of racial profiling in his career. All 5 had been marked unfounded by Internal Affairs after investigations that lasted an average of 3 days. Webb had been driving past the county administration building when he'd gotten a radio call from dispatch. Possible break-in attempt at county administration building, southeast entrance. Caller reports a suspicious person trying to access the building. Webb had responded that he was 1 block away and would check it out. He'd arrived 90 seconds later and had seen exactly what the caller had described. A black woman in casual clothes trying to unlock a side door to a government building before normal business hours. Webb's mind had made the same calculation it had made dozens of times before. Black person, plus expensive-looking bag, plus government building, plus early morning equals potential burglary. He hadn't considered that she might work there. Hadn't considered that she might have a legitimate key. Hadn't considered that county employees regularly arrived before 8:30 a.m. He'd seen what his biases had trained him to see, a threat that needed to be investigated. Keisha had kept her key in the lock but had turned to face Webb fully, keeping her hands visible. Years of prosecuting police misconduct cases had taught her exactly how these encounters could escalate. "I'm unlocking my office," she'd said calmly. "I work here. Is there a problem, officer?" Webb had looked her up and down, his expression skeptical. Jeans and a sweatshirt didn't look like government employee attire to him. "Your office? This is a government building. I need to see some ID and proof you're authorized to be here." Keisha's prosecutorial instincts had immediately flagged the problems with Webb's approach. He demanded ID without articulating reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. He demanded proof of authorization. to enter a building she was unlocking with a key. He was already on shaky legal ground, and Keisha knew it because she'd prosecuted cases involving these exact issues. "I have my identification," Keisha had said, her voice still calm but firmer now. "But I don't need to prove I'm authorized to enter my own office. What's your reasonable suspicion that I'm committing a crime?" Most civilians didn't use terms like reasonable suspicion. Most people didn't challenge deputies by citing legal standards. Webb had registered that this woman was different, but instead of being more careful, he'd gotten defensive. In his mind, questioning his authority was a red flag. It meant she had something to hide. "Don't get cute with me," Webb had said, his voice harder now. "We got reports of someone trying to break in. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." This had been the moment, the split second where Webb could have asked one simple question: "Can I see your ID?" If he'd done that, Keisha would have shown him her driver's license and her district attorney identification card, and this entire encounter would have ended with an apology and everyone going about their day. But Webb hadn't asked. He'd given an order. He'd told a woman who'd done nothing wrong to prepare to be handcuffed. Keisha had felt anger rising in her chest, but she'd kept her voice controlled. "Reports from whom? I'm the district attorney for this county. My name is on the door you're blocking, and you're about to violate clearly established Fourth Amendment law on camera." She'd pointed to the security camera mounted above the entrance, its red light blinking to indicate it was recording. Webb had stared at her. "You're what?" "The district attorney, Keisha Williams. My office is on the second floor. I've worked in this building for 16 years, and you're detaining me without reasonable suspicion, which violates the Fourth Amendment and your own department's policies." Most deputies, upon hearing they'd just detained the district attorney, would have immediately apologized and backed off, would have recognized the massive mistake they just made, would have understood that the woman in front of them had the power to charge them with crimes if this encounter went wrong. But Marcus Webb had been a deputy for 11 years under Sheriff Buck Morrison, who told his deputies repeatedly that the DA was the enemy and that they shouldn't let her intimidate them into not doing their jobs. Webb had heard stories in the locker room about how Keisha Williams was out to get cops and didn't care about officer safety. He'd been taught to view the district attorney's office as adversaries, not partners in the justice system. So instead of apologizing, Webb had made the worst decision of his career. "I don't care who you say you are," Webb had said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Right now you're a suspect in an investigation. You're under arrest for trespassing and resisting. You should have just cooperated." Keisha's eyes had narrowed. "I want your name and badge number. I want your supervisor called immediately. And I want you to understand that in about 5 minutes, you're going to realize you just arrested your boss's boss. Everything you're doing right now is being recorded, and it's going to cost you your career." Webb had ignored her. He'd grabbed Keisha's arm and pulled it behind her back. Keisha hadn't resisted. She knew that resisting arrest, even an unlawful arrest, could get you hurt or killed. She'd allowed Webb to handcuff her, but she'd spoken clearly toward the security camera the entire time. "I am Keisha Williams, District Attorney of Greenville County. I am being unlawfully arrested by Deputy Marcus Webb, badge number." She'd glanced at his uniform, 7439, while attempting to enter my office at the county administration building. I have a key to this building. I have proper identification. I have committed no crime. I am not resisting. This arrest is unlawful, and it is being recorded by the security camera above this entrance. I am complying under protest to avoid the use of force. Webb had finished handcuffing her and had pulled her toward his patrol car. The handcuffs had been tight. Too tight. Keisha had felt the metal digging into her wrists. She'd told Webb they were too tight. He'd ignored her. As Webb had been walking Keisha to his car, a white man in his 50s had pulled into the parking lot and had gotten out of his vehicle. He'd been wearing a suit and had been carrying a briefcase. He'd looked at the scene, deputy, handcuffed black woman, and had started walking toward them. "Officer, what's going on here?" the man had asked. Webb had turned. "This is official police business, sir. Please step back." The man had looked at Keisha, and his eyes had widened. "Keisha, is that you?" Keisha had recognized him, Thomas Patterson, the county clerk, whose office was on the first floor of the building. She'd worked with him for years. "Tom, yes. Deputy Webb is arresting me for trying to enter my office." Patterson had looked at Webb in disbelief. "Deputy, this is District Attorney Keisha Williams. She works here. I've worked with her for 16 years. Webb had hesitated for the first time. "You know her?" "Know her. She's the district attorney. Her office is on the second floor. She has every right to be here." Webb's face had gone pale. Keisha had watched the realization slowly dawn on him. He'd just handcuffed the district attorney, the person who could charge him with crimes, the person who supervised all prosecutions in the county, the person who'd sent 14 cops to prison in the last 4 years. I need to verify this," Webb had stammered. "Verify it however you want," Keisha had said coldly. "But these handcuffs are coming off right now, or I'm adding unlawful restraint to the list of charges I'm considering." Webb had fumbled with his keys and had removed the handcuffs. Keisha had rubbed her wrists, where the metal had left red marks. She'd pulled out her phone and had taken photos of the marks. Evidence. "I'm going to need your full report on this incident by end of business today," Keisha had said, her voice now carrying the full authority of her position. "I'm going to need the name of whoever called in the report of a suspicious person. I'm going to need the dispatch recording. And I'm going to need you to call your supervisor right now and explain what just happened." Webb had stood there, frozen, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. "Ma'am, I was just responding to a call. I was doing my job." "Your job is to enforce the law, not to arrest people for unlocking their own offices," Keisha had said. "Your job is to have reasonable suspicion before detaining someone. Your job is to ask questions before putting people in handcuffs. You failed at all of those things. Now call your supervisor." Webb had pulled out his radio with shaking hands. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7-4. I need a supervisor to respond to the county administration building immediately." The response had come back within seconds. 10-4, Unit 7-4. Sergeant Rodriguez is en route. ETA 4 minutes. Keisha had looked at Thomas Patterson. "Tom, I need you to stay here as a witness until the sergeant arrives." Patterson had nodded. "Of course, Keisha. I'm so sorry this happened." "Not your fault," Keisha had said. Then she'd looked at Webb. "But it is someone's fault. And we're going to figure out exactly whose." Those 4 minutes while they'd waited for the sergeant had been the longest of Marcus Webb's career. He'd stood there in silence, watching Keisha photograph the scene, photograph her wrists, make notes on her phone. He'd realized that everything he'd done in the last 10 minutes was being documented by a prosecutor who knew exactly what evidence she needed to destroy him. Sergeant Luis Rodriguez had arrived at 6:54 a.m. He'd gotten out of his patrol car and had immediately recognized Keisha. His eyes had gone wide. "Ms. Williams, what's going on?" "Your deputy arrested me for attempting to enter my own office," Keisha had said flatly. "Handcuffed me. Detained me for 7 minutes. Did it all without reasonable suspicion, without asking for identification, and despite my repeated explanations that I'm the district attorney and work in this building." Rodriguez had turned to Webb, his expression a mixture of shock and anger. "Is this true?" Webb had tried to explain. "Sarge, I got a call about a suspicious person trying to break in. I responded and found her trying to unlock the door. She wasn't wearing professional clothes, she didn't have any visible ID, and when I asked her who she was, she got defensive. I asked you what your reasonable suspicion was, Keisha had interrupted. That's not being defensive. That's asserting my constitutional rights. Rights you violated when you detained me without cause. Rodriguez had looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. Ms. Williams, on behalf of the Sheriff's Department, I sincerely apologize. Save it, Keisha had said. I don't want apologies. I want answers. Who called this in? Who reported a suspicious person? Rodriguez had radioed dispatch and had requested the information. The answer had come back 2 minutes later. Anonymous call from a cell phone. Caller reported a black female in casual clothing attempting to access the southeast entrance of the county administration building. Caller said it looked suspicious because the building doesn't open until 8:30. Anonymous, Keisha had repeated, her voice heavy with skepticism. So, someone saw a black woman with a key trying to enter a government building at 6:45 in the morning and decided that was suspicious enough to call 911. And neither dispatch nor Deputy Webb thought to question whether someone with a key might actually work there. Rodriguez had said nothing because there was nothing to say. The racial profiling was obvious. Keisha had unlocked the building entrance with her key, the same key she'd been trying to use when Webb had detained her. She'd turned to Rodriguez. I'm going to my office now. I expect Deputy Webb's incident report, the dispatch recording, and the caller's phone number on my desk by 5 p.m. today. If those materials aren't there, I'll subpoena them. And Sergeant, you need to understand something. This isn't over. Not even close. She'd walked into the building, leaving Webb and Rodriguez standing outside. Thomas Patterson had followed her in, shaking his head in disgust. Keisha had gone straight to her office, sat down at her desk, and had started documenting everything while it was fresh in her mind. Every word spoken, every action taken, every violation of her rights. She'd typed for 47 minutes, creating a minute-by-minute account that ran 8 pages, single-spaced. Then, she'd started making phone calls. Her first call had gone to her chief deputy, Marcus Chen, waking him up at 7:38 a.m. She'd explained what happened. Chen had been furious. Are you okay? I'm fine, angry, but fine. I need you to open an investigation file. Criminal civil rights violation. Suspect. Deputy Marcus Webb. I'm the victim, so you're going to handle the prosecution if we file charges. Start pulling everything on Webb. His personnel file, his arrest statistics, any complaints against him. Already on it, Chen had said. This is insane, Keisha. He arrested the DA. He arrested a black woman he assumed was a criminal, Keisha had corrected. The fact that I'm the DA just means I can do something about it. Her second call had gone to the Greenville County Administrator, the person who oversaw all county departments including the sheriff's office. She'd laid out what happened and had demanded an immediate meeting. Her third call had gone to the FBI field office in Columbia. She'd asked to speak to the Civil Rights Division. She'd explained that she was the district attorney of Greenville County and that she'd just been the victim of what appeared to be racially motivated unlawful arrest by a sheriff's deputy, and that she had reason to believe this was part of a pattern of civil rights violations in the department. The FBI had been very interested. By 9 a.m., the story had already leaked. Someone in the sheriff's department, probably someone who didn't like Buck Morrison, had called the local newspaper. The Greenville Observer had posted a breaking news alert. District attorney arrested outside her own office, claims racial profiling. By 10 a.m., the story was on local TV news. By noon, it was on CNN. By 2 p.m., it was trending on Twitter under the hashtag #ArrestedWhileBlack. The security footage from the county administration building had been provided to media outlets by the county administrator, who was quietly furious about what had happened to Keisha. The footage showed everything. It showed Keisha unlocking the door with a key. It showed Webb approaching aggressively. It showed Keisha calmly explaining who she was. It showed Webb handcuffing her anyway. It showed the entire 7-minute detention. The video had been viewed 6.8 million times in the first 24 hours. Legal experts and civil rights advocates had weighed in immediately. This is textbook racial profiling, a law professor from Duke University had said on MSNBC. A black woman with a key is trying to enter a building where she works, and someone calls the police because they think she looks suspicious. That's not reasonable suspicion. That's racism. Sheriff Buck Morrison had held a press conference at 3 p.m. He'd defended his deputy. Deputy Webb was responding to a call about a possible break-in. He followed department protocol. The fact that the person detained happened to be the district attorney doesn't change the fact that he was doing his job. Keisha had watched the press conference from her office, and she'd smiled grimly. Buck Morrison had just made a massive tactical mistake. He'd defended Webb instead of apologizing. He'd implied that arresting the district attorney for unlocking her own office was protocol. He'd given Keisha exactly what she needed, evidence that the problem wasn't just one deputy, but a culture of bias that started at the top. The dispatch recording had been delivered to Keisha's office at 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before her deadline. She'd listened to it 3 times. The anonymous caller had described a black female, 20s or 30s, jeans and hoodie, trying to get into the county building through a side door. The caller had said it looked wrong and suspicious. The caller hadn't described any actual criminal behavior, just a black woman with a key. Keisha had requested the phone number. The county had provided it. Keisha had run the number through the county's reverse directory. The call had come from a cell phone registered to Sharon Mitchell, a 67-year-old white woman who lived 3 blocks from the county administration building. Keisha had called the number. A woman had answered. "Ms. Mitchell, this is District Attorney Keisha Williams. I understand you called 911 yesterday morning to report a suspicious person at the county administration building." There had been a long pause. Yes, I saw someone who looked like they didn't belong there." Why did they look like they didn't belong? They were dressed casually, and it was early and, "Ms. Mitchell, that person was me. I'm the district attorney. I work in that building. I have a key to that building. I was going to work early, and you called the police because I looked like I didn't belong. Can you explain to me what about my appearance made you think I was committing a crime?" Another long pause. I didn't know it was you." "That's not what I asked. What made you think I was suspicious?" I've never seen anyone go in that early before." "Have you ever called the police on white people entering that building early?" Silence. "I didn't think so," Keisha had said. "Ms. Mitchell, what you did yesterday led to my unlawful arrest. I'm deciding right now whether to pursue charges against you for filing a false police report. I suggest you think very carefully about why you saw a black woman with a key unlocking a door and decided that was a crime." Keisha had hung up before Mitchell could respond. The internal investigation into Deputy Marcus Webb had been opened immediately, not by the sheriff's department, but by Keisha's office. She'd recused herself from the prosecution. She couldn't prosecute her own case, and had assigned it to her, Chief Deputy Marcus Chen. Chen had spent 3 weeks investigating. What he'd found had been damning. Chen had pulled Webb's complete arrest and stop data for his entire 11-year career. The statistics had been staggering. Out of 1,247 investigative stops Webb had made in 11 years, 1,031 had been of black individuals, 82.7% of his total stops. Greenville County was 62% white, 31% black. Webb was stopping black people at nearly 3 times the rate you'd expect based on demographics. His search patterns had been even worse. Webb had searched 34% of black individuals he'd stopped, but only 11% of white individuals. And the hit rate, the percentage of searches that found contraband, was 19% for black individuals versus 38% for white individuals. Webb was searching black people on thinner justification and finding evidence less often. His arrest patterns had shown the same disparities. Webb had arrested 389 people in 11 years. Of those, 327 were black, 84%. Of those 327 arrests, 109 had been dismissed before trial, 33%. One-third of his arrests of black individuals had been so weak that prosecutors couldn't even get past preliminary hearings. Chen had also discovered that Webb had received 5 formal complaints of racial profiling in 11 years. The complaints had all told similar stories. Black individuals stopped for vague reasons, questioned about what they were doing in certain neighborhoods, searched without clear cause, arrested for minor charges that were later dismissed. Internal Affairs had marked all 5 complaints as unfounded, after investigations that lasted an average of 2.8 days. The investigations had consisted of asking Webb if he'd racially profiled anyone. He'd always said no, and then closing the file. But Chen had found something even more disturbing. He'd pulled the training records for the entire sheriff's department. He'd discovered that the department had never provided mandatory training on implicit bias, racial profiling, or constitutional policing, despite the fact that state law required such training. Deputies received firearms training, defensive tactics training, and arrest procedures training, but 0 hours of training on how to avoid letting racial bias influence their decisions. The pattern hadn't been limited to Webb. Chen had analyzed stop data for all 147 deputies in the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. He'd found that 41 deputies, 28% of the force, showed statistically significant racial disparities in their stop and search patterns. 41 deputies who were stopping and searching black residents at rates that couldn't be explained by crime rates or demographics. The problem was systemic. Chen had presented his findings to Keisha in a conference room, laying out charts and graphs showing the disparities. Keisha had looked at the data for a long time without speaking. "File charges against Webb," she'd finally said. "Deprivation of rights under color of law, false, arrest, unlawful restraint, and open a civil rights investigation into the entire department. I want every stop, every search, every arrest for the last 5 years analyzed. If we find evidence of a pattern and practice of civil rights violations, we're going to the Department of Justice." "Keisha," Chen had said carefully, "if we do this, Sheriff Morrison is going to fight back, hard. He's going to call you vindictive. He's going to say you're prosecuting Webb because you're mad about being arrested." "Let him," Keisha had said. "The data doesn't lie. And I'm not prosecuting Webb because he arrested me. I'm prosecuting him because he violated my constitutional rights. The fact that he did it to the district attorney just means he finally did it to someone who has the power and knowledge to hold him accountable. How many people has he done this to who didn't have those advantages?" The criminal complaint against Deputy Marcus Webb had been filed 4 weeks after Keisha's arrest. The AUI charges, deprivation of rights under color of law under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, false arrest, and unlawful restraint. The complaint had been 23 pages and had included the security footage, the dispatch recording, Webb's statement to his sergeant, and statistical analysis of Webb's stop patterns over 11 years. The story had exploded nationally. "District Attorney charges deputy who arrested her," read the New York Times headline. The case had become a lightning rod in debates about police accountability and racial profiling. Sheriff Buck Morrison had held another press conference. He'd called the charges politically motivated and, and abuse of prosecutorial power. He'd said Keisha was using her office to settle personal scores. He'd said his deputies were afraid to do their jobs because the DA will charge them if they make honest mistakes. Keisha had responded with her own press conference. She'd stood at a podium with charts behind her showing Webb's arrest statistics. "This is not about one arrest," she'd said. "This is about a pattern of racial profiling that has affected hundreds of black residents of this county. Deputy Webb stopped black residents at 3 times the rate of white residents. He searched them at 3 times the rate. He arrested them at higher rates despite finding evidence less often. That's not policing. That's discrimination. And it's going to stop." The trial had been scheduled for 7 months after the charges were filed. Webb's attorney, provided by the police union, had filed multiple motions to dismiss, all of which had been denied by the judge. The case had gone to trial in front of a jury of 12 Greenville County residents, 7 white, 4 black, 1 Hispanic. The prosecution's case had been devastating. Chen had presented the security footage showing Webb arresting Keisha, despite her explanations. He'd presented the dispatch recording showing the call was based on nothing but someone thinking a black woman looked suspicious. He'd presented expert testimony from a statistician showing Webb's stop patterns were consistent with racial profiling. He'd presented testimony from 3 other black residents who'd been unlawfully stopped by Webb. A doctor detained while entering the hospital where he worked. A lawyer questioned while walking to the courthouse. A businessman accused of loitering outside his own store. Webb's defense had been simple. He'd been following protocol, responding to a call, had no way of knowing Keisha was the district attorney. His attorney had argued that honest mistakes shouldn't be crimes. The prosecution's closing argument had demolished that defense. "This wasn't an honest mistake," Chen had told the jury. Deputy Webb had multiple opportunities to avoid this. He could have asked for ID before detaining anyone. He could have listened when Ms. Williams explained who she was. He could have looked at the key in her hand and realized she had legitimate access to the building. He could have called the county administrator to verify her identity. He could have shown basic respect and professionalism. He did none of those things because he saw a black woman and assumed she was a criminal. That's not an honest mistake. That's a civil rights violation. The jury had deliberated for 11 hours over 2 days. When they'd returned, the verdict had been unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Deputy Marcus Webb had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, the maximum allowed under the statute. He'd also been terminated from the sheriff's department, lost his law enforcement certification, and been ordered to pay $75,000 in restitution to Keisha for damages. But the consequences hadn't stopped there. The FBI civil rights investigation that Keisha had requested had taken 14 months. Federal investigators had analyzed 5 years of data from the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. They'd reviewed 22,000 stops, 4,800 searches, and 3,100 arrests. They'd interviewed 167 community members. They'd analyzed complaint handling procedures. They'd reviewed training records. Their findings had been released in a 143-page report that had confirmed everything Keisha had suspected. The Greenville County Sheriff's Office had engaged in a pattern and practice of racially discriminatory policing. Black residents were stopped at 2.6 times the rate of white residents. They were searched at 3.4 times the rate. They were arrested at higher rates despite being found with contraband at lower rates. The department had failed to train officers on implicit bias. Internal Affairs had systematically dismissed complaints of racial profiling without adequate investigation. And the culture started at the top, with Sheriff Buck Morrison, who'd repeatedly defended discriminatory practices and attacked critics as anti-police. The Department of Justice had filed a lawsuit against Greenville County seeking a consent decree, a court-enforced agreement requiring comprehensive reforms. The county had settled rather than fight. The consent decree had required massive changes. mandatory implicit bias training, civilian oversight board, independent monitor, monthly analysis of stop data, early warning system to identify problematic officers, and federal monitoring for 5 years. Sheriff Buck Morrison had announced his retirement 3 weeks after the consent decree was signed. He'd claimed it was for health reasons, but everyone knew the truth. His department had been found to have engaged in systematic civil rights violations on his watch, and he was leaving before he could be forced out. Keisha Williams had won. Not just her own case, but the larger fight for accountability and reform. The deputy who'd arrested her was in federal prison. The sheriff who'd defended that deputy had been forced to retire. The department had been forced to change its practices. And hundreds of black residents who'd been subjected to discriminatory policing finally had validation that what they'd experienced wasn't in their imagination. It was real. It was documented. And it was going to stop.